Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for Power Rangers Lightning Collection Dino Fury Red. This is our first entry into the Dino Fury series in this line, and it is currently the main series, so that makes sense. We did start Beast Morpher last year when it was current, however, not last year, last season rather, last series. However, we still are awaiting Yellow and Silver. That's one that's like, can you at least do Yellow, because then it completes the team of 3. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with the accessories. Gonna start with the head here because I keep forgetting them almost. Honestly, I think it's one of the more accurate head sculpts. They can be kind of hit and miss, and even when they're accurate, look kind of lifeless, and this has a little bit of that, but it's overall, at least in my opinion, one of the most accurate ones I've seen. Then in addition to the holding weapons hand you have on him, you have one silver-sided closed fist and one posed fist red. Your standard lightning effect here, and then obviously you have the Chroma Fury Saber, which is very basically painted. I think it leaves a lot to be desired. I think there's a couple things on here look and paint-wise that seem more like they would come with your basic figure. Like, it's kind of got the basic colors on it with the gold and the eye and stuff, but this looks rather basic and this looks rather basic, and it looks kind of in between what you would expect from something like this and a basic figure. And it is kind of unfortunate because I think they started off really strong with the weapons, and sometimes you will get a really nicely painted weapon, but I feel like the quality on the weapons paint has dropped down a little bit. And just while I'm talking about it, the Morpher isn't painted either, and it's much more in line with something you would see on a basic figure. We'll get the comparison in here for that in just a minute. And to me, that's not like a huge deal breaker, like I'm not really that upset over it, but it does kind of suck, mainly because this does kind of stand out like a big honker, and it also kind of sucks logically that this has the same level of paint that you would get on a basic figure. I feel like at the very least they could just throw a swash of red paint in here, kind of like this kind of has some just key points of detail. Like, it's not overly detailed, but it has some sort of things to differentiate it, and at least a little swash of red paint would have it be differentiated more from just a black blob. Now, talking about everything else, I feel like this figure is a little bit of a mixed bag. I don't think that this one has anything like really bad about it that makes an overall really bad product, but there's lots of little like small things about it that are just off to me. I think the head sculpt is actually pretty decent, like just looking at the head in a vacuum, that sounded really weird. But in terms of like the accuracy of the sculpt, you know, the rounded feeling of it, it doesn't feel too skinny, it doesn't feel too puffy. I think it overall looks pretty good. I think the silver paint looks pretty good. You're probably going to want to watch out for some QC issues around here depending on which one you get, but just the helmet itself I think looks really good, and I'm happy with it on its own. I say on its own because, at least for me, and maybe it's just me, when you get down to the chest, there's something off about the proportions going from the head, the neck, to the chest that make his head seem a little bit small, and also I feel like puff out his chest to make it seem like he's transforming into a Bandai America bulk figure. It's not like Bulk the character, but like a bulky figure. That's kind of a funny thing that you run into when you can't use the word bulk in Power Rangers discussions without making you think of bulk. I guess skull either, that's also a word outside of the name. Anyway, point is, it looks a little off to me. It's nothing like deal-breaking, like, oh, this is awful, but it's just off to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Speaking of the paint details around here, though, you do have a really nice silver paint here that contrasts nicely, and I think in a vacuum, this section looks nice. But you do have a discrepancy a little bit in the arm and chest paint for the silver. This is a little bit more of a dark silver. It's not that bad. Honestly, if you were to, I wouldn't say don't get this figure solely based on that. There's been worse discrepancies. I've recently mentioned in some reviews about the pink inaccuracies for In Space Pink and MMPR Pink, where they had lots of different shades of pink all around. Again, didn't they hear too much pink energy is dangerous, and it looked really blotchy and unprofessional. You can tell the difference here, but it's not that bad. I'll just say, I wish it was a little bit closer together, but there's definitely a little bit of a difference, to the point where I had to look it up, because it almost made me question, like, were the arms darker in the show? But then I remember that was Dino Charge. And, you know, there's not a whole lot to write home about the legs. I think the legs look fine. You know, you kind of got some little cloth molding details. The gold paint here looks fine. Nothing too huge to write home about. Again, you can see there is a difference, but it's not deal-breakingly different. Articulation-wise, all pretty standard stuff. Nice ball joint here on the leg. Knee joint here. You have a nice hinge joint here at the foot. Nice ball joint here and hinge joint. Elbow joint here. Swiveling at the fist. Hinge joint at the chest. Ball joint at the waist. Wait, strike that. Reverse it. And then you have a nice ball joint here for up and down, 360 exorcist stuff on the head, and overall nicely articulated in terms of like no loose joints or anything like that. I believe this should be going up after Dino Charge Pink, and I mentioned in that review how no loose joints with that either, but some of them were almost too tight around the legs, too stiff, and the feet that became a problem with, so it couldn't stand. Fortunately, this one is kind of like the perfect level of doesn't feel loose, doesn't feel too tight or anything like that. Now with this guy, we only have one real comparison because this is the current series, so there isn't years of figures to compare to, and there also wasn't a Figure Arts version yet, but we just have the basic figure there. And you can see on a base level, this is definitely the overall better figure. I have my nitpicks and problems with it, but this does look overall more accurate, more details, even though the details are actually pretty comparable. Main actual, I would say, two things that are superior about it outside of the general mold seeming less strange and gawky is the helmet's more accurate on this, you know, shinier silver paint, more well-rounded, and it actually does have a nice silver paint, whereas this is more gray. However, even here there's a little discrepancy in the color. But those are the two main things about it. But you can just see overall, despite my issues with this figure a little bit, this is the better version. And he does have a better look like Spiral Squiggle as well, because it is a little more accurate to this. This one's a little bit puffier. But you can see that their morphers are basically the same. Like, this one's obviously bigger, but you can kind of see what I mean about the fact that it kind of sucks that this does have the same morpher as a basic figure in terms of that non-painted plastic blotch. Overall, this is kind of an interesting release, though, because it has just kind of a series of little things that I think are a little bit off of and unfortunate, and it's a figure I could see that down the road they could release an improved version, and I feel it would make a world of difference in regards to how the proportion feels to me. But there's not anything about it that I feel is glaringly awful. It's just kind of a lot of little classic Lightning Collection mistakes. So I would say it's an overall okay release with some unfortunate classic Lightning mistakes popping up in it. In regards to like what I would recommend for a red figure, I mean, you could see from the comparison that despite its, you know, issues, this is an overall better looking figure. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you're wanting to build the full team, who knows how long it'll take to get the full team for this. I hope they do pink and blue next, just so you can at least complete your team of 3 first. It's taken a while to get some teams completed. As I mentioned, they released Beast Morphers figures when it was current, but we're still waiting on 2 team members, so that's something to consider, whereas with this, you can pick up the Amazon 5-pack right away, or at the very least, the core 3 figures. So if your main concern is team building and you're not patient, that's something to think about, because this is our first foray into it, and it could be a while before we're able to complete the team. Even if they make it a priority, it's going to take multiple waves, because they're not going to release 2 in a wave, and I'm going to, you know, place my bets that the next one will be gold. But that's about it for this one, though, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.